Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee. Today is Sunday, December 10th, and I'm your host, Josh Newberg. Today, we are putting one class to bed and starting up another. It's been a fun ride with the 2026 cycle, but I think today's show will kind of tie a bow on that, and we'll be ready to move on to 2027 recruiting. But of course, I couldn't have done it without you guys. What a fun cycle it was. If you watched one of these shows during 2026 recruiting, make sure you hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruit channel. We're having a lot of fun here, and we are the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right, so as I said, today's show has a theme. We are telling behind-the-scenes stories from some of the most exciting recruitments in 2026. Now, we'll get backstories from Ohio State, LSU, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Virginia Tech, and USC, plus more. Let's get to it. Let's go behind the scenes of Ohio State's 2026 signing class. Now, there's two major situations I want to get the backstory on: the Chris Henry Jr. last-minute drama, and what is the latest with Legend Bay? Is he really going to stick with Tennessee, or could we see him end up at Ohio State? We got Buckeye insider Jeremy Birmingham on the show. He's going to break it all down for us. But before we get going, guys, do me a favor, Ohio State fans. Hit subscribe. These are exciting times on the recruiting trail. We're going to cover it all off season long. All right, let's bring in Jeremy Birmingham from Letterman Row. And let's start with that. The back and forth with the Chris Henry stuff. Do you think that it was truly, was the catalyst the Brian Hartline situation, or was there kind of an underlying buzz either way that was going to happen?
Obviously, Josh, Greg Biggins and Adam Gorney and Steve Wiltfong and a lot of people that have a pulse on the national scene had been talking about the increased push made from Oregon basically 2 weeks ahead of signing day. But as far as like going into Wednesday morning last week, Tuesday night, I got a text message from people in Columbus at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center saying, hey, tomorrow's going to be a pretty stress-free day. And that was about 10:30 or so Tuesday night. And come to find out, around midnight, an hour and a half later, that's when Brian Hartline let Ryan Day know that he was going to be departing for the South Florida job. And at that point, everything obviously went a little bit off the rails for Ohio State. Fortunately for the Buckeyes, and probably because of Ryan Day and the stewardship he has over the program, it didn't end up being a disaster, but it certainly could have been, because remember that Brian Hartline news, Pete Nakos broke it at 10 a.m. on signing day, and Chris Henry Jr. was supposed to be signing and sending in his letter of intent 30 minutes later. So
right.
It certainly turned into a different conversation for Ohio State, but that discussion about Chris Henry and the solidity of his commitment had been going on since basically March. No matter how many times he had posted that his commitment was shut down, or how many times Hayes Fawcett had tweeted that Chris was sending out that message. When you're a five-star, number one ranked player at your position type of prospect, people are going to keep coming after you. And any window that gets opened, any door that gets cracked is going to be fully opened as quickly as possible. What's interesting really is that I don't think by the time it was all settled on Friday morning that Ohio State was really in a battle against anybody other than itself, because I believe that the conversation shifted pretty dramatically once Jalen Lott signed with Oregon. But, if we go back to last week, it was 24 hours basically of back and forth. I was doing a podcast for the Austin and Berm show on 97.1 The Fan in Columbus, and got a phone call in the middle of the show that I had to stop the show on and say, well, this is a pretty important call from somebody that would be involved in the next day's conversations. And that person said, hey, we're not going to keep pushing this. If he wants to go somewhere else, he can. We're not going to bow out, but we've made our best and final, and that's where it's going to be. And so at that point, all of the buzz that afternoon, on Thursday afternoon, was about Chris Henry in Oregon. That was about 3.5 hours after Steve and Greg and Adam had put in their RPMs for the flip. Up until that phone call, I was told Ohio State was very much keeping the fight alive, making sure that they weren't going to let it go down without the swings that they could take. And then 3.5 hours later, Jalen Lott signed, and it seemed like everything shifted again then.
Yeah, the back and forth was crazy, reading those sites from Wednesday until Friday. And I remember, was it Thursday morning, Friday morning? Ohio State really hadn't heard from Chris Henry, so it didn't sound like there was active negotiations going on. But what was Ohio State's, what were they trying to do down in those final days? Were they in reassuring him about the replacement for Brian Hartline? Were they just giving him his space? How were they handling it?
Mostly the latter, understanding that he was in a difficult spot, Ohio State, and Ryan Day said it as much as he could publicly, that they understand. Like it's a crazy thing to happen on signing day. When Ryan Day, this is what I was told, when the Buckeyes found out about midnight on Tuesday that Brian was leaving, they attempted to reach out to Chris at that time. I don't know if you've ever tried to reach out to Chris, Josh. Anybody else will tell you that he is difficult to get on the phone. He did not respond and did not have a need to respond at that point, and apparently didn't read a message until the next morning when he was on his way to school, even though Ohio State, from my understanding, had been in touch with David Mulugeta, his agent, 3 hours prior to that. I heard his agent was on vacation in a western city, maybe celebrating up at 3 a.m. is what I heard. But that's irrelevant. So yeah, that 24 hours was not really like, hey, we're not talking with Chris, or Chris isn't talking to us. It was, Chris is always difficult to reach, and now the conversation is going exclusively almost through the family and David Mulugeta while he sorted out his feelings. What I found most interesting is that in the last 12 hours or so, maybe 15 hours after Jalen Lott signed, it seemed like from the Ohio State side that they felt they may have been negotiating against themselves, which was a sign, I think, that Oregon was in a position knowing that if Chris Henry would have signed with them on Thursday afternoon, that Jalen Lott probably would have signed with Texas. So despite all of the discussion about Oregon and their deep pockets, even they apparently had a limit as to what they were willing to put into this one specific recruiting class, because I think once Jalen signed, they realized they could slowly back off, and maybe they accomplished something and made Ohio State pay a little bit more than they initially intended to. But the reality for Brian Hartline's recruits and receivers now in the future at Ohio State, that there has been a Brian Hartline discount that Ohio State has been getting. That's no longer on the table. So now you have to renegotiate. We saw that not just with Chris, but with Jaquaden Guilford as well.
So what did you think when you saw that he was going to make his announcement on Pat McAfee? Because you and I have been covering recruiting for a long time. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, anytime a recruit was going to announce a commitment when he's currently committed, or, announce a decision, it was always going to be, or 99% of the time, it was going to be another program, not the school that he's currently committed to. But in this day and age, I mean, we've seen it quite a bit over the last 3, 4, 5 years where guys they're committed to a program, but they have to make another decision. So when you saw the Pat McAfee, he was going on there, how did you feel? Or did you already know it was going to be Ohio State at that point? Because also, I didn't see it, but our guys in this office saw Pat McAfee tweet that he was going to commit to Oregon and quickly delete it. I don't know if you saw that when McAfee quickly deleted it, but what was your thoughts that morning?
I didn't, because I was driving to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game, and so there's a funny thing, and you're a guy that you've dealt with coaching staffs, you know this. When things are going poorly, when there's a belief that something is going to go awry, have you ever noticed how much more willing coaches are to talk about that?
Yeah, because they don't want to jinx. If they know he's coming, they don't want you to put it out. They don't want you to step on it. And so when it's going the other way,
that morning, the people that I talked to in Ohio State's offices were abnormally quiet. I will say that. So I think that there was an inclination on their part that maybe things had shifted back in their direction. When I saw that it was going to be on McAfee and he was there with Kirk, and then there's AJ Hawk, and there's a lot of Buckeye flavor in that show, I thought maybe that it meant something a little bit different. Understanding again, that David Mulugeta is one of the best sports agents in the world and knows how to get his client's attention. Right. Coupled that, and this is me putting on a tinfoil hat, but I'm not sure if you noticed that Chris Henry and his family launched a podcast last week. So maybe there was an idea that this was a good way to really get some eyeballs on that as they start their new ventures and business ventures. I found out that it was going to be Ohio State about 2 minutes before he went on the show. So that's when I was told the people in Columbus found out for sure, but I don't know that without, with certainty, but that was the message I was relayed on Friday morning.
Jeez, yeah, just craziness following it. I'm sure the fans were with us the whole way of this roller coaster ride, but in the end, he's an Ohio State Buckeye. Now, let's dig into this Legend Bay because he did not end up an Ohio State Buckeye. If you guys remember, Legend Bay, the electric athlete out of Texas, flipped his commitment to Ohio State about 4 weeks ago now, 3 weeks before signing day, and then on signing day, a whole lot of craziness went on. What was it like from your perspective covering the Legend Bay situation? Did you know heading into signing day that he could end up signing with Tennessee?
There was zero concern from the Ohio State staff about Tennessee heading into signing day. On Wednesday morning, as the signature started to come in, that's right when we were getting into the Woody Hayes Athletic Center for the day's press conference. Legends had not come in, but neither had a handful of other guys who were in different time zones. So it wasn't a major concern. Then about 12:30, messages started to come like, hey, this is weird. There might be some issues with the family. Ohio State, I was told, had received a signed document from Legend, and I don't believe that was his Big Ten scholarship agreement. Let me be clear, because that needs to be signed by the parents. I was told that Ohio State canceled a DocuSign that had come over from him when there were questions or concerns from the family side of things, and they weren't entirely sure what they were going to do. About 1:15, we were getting ready to wrap up at the Woody, and we were told by a couple different sources, hey, this is good. We're going to get this done in the next half hour. It's a done deal. Went to lunch, and by the time I got back got done eating lunch, there was a message, holy crap, he signed with Tennessee. And then obviously all of the intrigue and mystery that came from there, some of which Sam Spiegelman highlighted on your show last week, discussions about trips being taken without Legend and the potential forgery stuff or whatever. Ohio State was doing what it felt was best by making sure that they released him and deleted the DocuSign that he sent over so that the family could all get on the same page. Obviously that did not work out in their favor, but there's still 22 days or 23 days until the transfer portal begins. And if Tennessee's not going to release him from his contract or his scholarship agreement, as they seem not to be interested in doing, then it leaves 23 days of speculation, because we've all seen the deleted messages. We've all seen the deleted tweets. We've all seen the TikTok message, him saying that, once the transfer portal opens, he'll probably end up at Ohio State. The fact is he signed with Tennessee, and Ohio State can't talk to him at this point. So there's not a lot that they can really get out of it other than what Legend himself has said. And we'll see how that goes in the next 3 weeks. But it's one of the weirder situations I've ever seen, just because of all of the potential malfeasance when it comes to the reports of forgeries and mom traveling by herself to Tennessee the weekend before signing day, et cetera. That's all rumor. No one's ever going to prove it. No one's ever going to say that no one's ever going to show receipts, because no one's going to have to. But a lot of times, and again, as you know, those sorts of things don't just get made up out of nothing.
Yeah, and because of the transfer portal, these letters of intent are only so binding. I mean, we saw, Julian Sayans on Ohio State's roster. He attended a couple bowl practices, put the Alabama uniform on a couple times before making the switch to Ohio State. So
he was at the Rose Bowl against Michigan in 2024. So and then was at Ohio State 2 weeks later. So we've seen weird things happen over and over. It's going to get weirder and weirder, Josh, as you know, like this. Until there are guardrails put into place, until you can actually enforce a signature on a NIL opportunity. Like, I think the most interesting thing is going to see how Georgia and the Damon Wilson thing plays out, with them trying to recoup some money here from him, because at some point these schools have to fight back. We've been waiting for the player power era to get here, and now it's here. But there's going to have to be a pushback from the schools at some point, because the amount of money that's being bandied about is, and the perks, the extras are just, it's a lot, man.
Yeah. And Georgia, maybe the first team to really stick their neck out there and go after a player, could set precedent. Like, it could start to set up those guardrails if Georgia wins this, or if Damon Wilson wins this. That's going to be pretty heavy precedent for how things are handled moving forward. So I would keep an eye on that. All right. Let's talk about this top 10 class. Enough with the drama. When it's all said and done, 5-6 years from now, we're looking back at 2026 class. Who are your breakout stars?
I mean, they're certainly the easy ones to predict. The 5 stars, the Kari Wilders, the guys who are 6'4", 270 pounds, who can play defensive end to play defensive tackle. He's going to be asked to play as a freshman for Ohio State without question. That's a guy that people are going to know. The reason Ohio State was so high on Kari Wilder early in the process was because physically they felt like he was one of the few defensive ends in the country who would be physically ready for Big Ten football as a freshman. That's why Luke Wafel, the USC signee, was so high on their list too, because they know at defensive end they're going to be needing immediate contributions. I think Sincere Johnson, the linebacker from Cleveland Glenville High School, is going to be not just a fan favorite at Ohio State, but an all Big Ten day 1, day 2 type pick down the road. He is a sensational tackler, a really smart football player in the middle, a true Mike linebacker, which doesn't exist much anymore. But at 6'4", 230 pounds, like he's got the physicality and the range to really make a lot of plays for Ohio State down the road. Blaine Bradford, obviously, that's one for the Buckeyes recruiting class that if you're trying to just put like a note on this class and say, this is how this cycle went for Ohio State. Blaine Bradford committed to Ohio State completely out of the blue in March, never took another visit anywhere else. All the conversation about LSU through the summer, all the conversation about Lane Kiffin and everything after Brian Kelly was let go, never a waiver, never a single thought of going elsewhere, made multiple trips to Ohio State. He's going to have to come in and play for the Buckeyes next year because the safety situation is, while it will be okay, when you lose Caleb Downs, you're looking for that next big thing. And Blaine Bradford, they think, has the potential to be that guy. He's another player that's just extremely charismatic, a guy that is going to really absolutely dominate in this NIL era in a city like Columbus. And on the offensive side of the ball, I mentioned him earlier, but I think Jaquaden Guilford may end up being the steal of this class for Ohio State. The people that I've spoken to in Columbus about him view him as like a Carnell Tate type of wide receiver, but one with a little bit higher end athleticism. So they think that he's got the potential to be a first-round pick down the road. And that's why you saw Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin try to get him, and then LSU with Lane Kiffin try to get him as well. So there are a lot of really good players in this class. I think when you look at next year's contribution, the most interesting guy on offense to me would have been Legend Bay, other than Chris Henry, because I think Legend and his versatility would have put him in a position to be on the field for the Buckeyes. So we'll see how that transpires over these next 3 weeks. But I think this is a class that defensively is going to get a lot of early contribution. Again, I really like Dre Quinn. I think it's a 6'5", 225 pound. He's that true edge rusher frame that Ohio State is looking for, similar to like Kenyatta Jackson, Chase Young eventually down the road, that he'll end up being in that 6'5", 265 range. I think he's a guy that people will talk about later. And then there's Jay Timmons, who I think people are just going to absolutely love at Ohio State. Big time personality, that cocky, almost borderline arrogant cornerback. He's going to talk a big game. He's going to play a big game. And I think Ohio State will count on him early too.
Yeah. And, every year there's a lot of talent out because of the success that Ohio State players have on the field heading to the NFL. So a huge group of talented players coming in. Ohio State fans, beyond the drama, what do you think of this class? How are you guys feeling? And who are your breakout stars moving forward? Let us know. Let's go behind the scenes of LSU's 2026 class, and what a wild ride this was for LSU fans. Remember, Brian Kelly started this class. Lane Kiffin finishes it. We're going to go behind the scenes today with Sam Spiegelman to tell a few of the interesting backstories from LSU signing day. But before we get going, Tiger fans, do me a favor, hit subscribe to the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. You guys were with us all the way up through signing day, so we're going to continue talking LSU recruiting the entire offseason. So jump on board, hit subscribe. All right, let's bring in national analyst Sam Spiegelman. And Sam, gotta say, locking in that D-line class, Lamar Brown, Big Rich, Trenton Henderson, Deuce Geralds, that had to be, what do you think? That had to be the most important storyline, at least of signing day week.
100%. That was a back and forth situation that started with both blue chip defensive linemen confirming their commitment to the Tigers after Lane Kiffin was hired. But then it was a matter of when would they sign. Both eventually signed the in-state guys by Thursday night. We saw Deuce Gerald and Trenton Henderson follow suit on Friday, and all of a sudden you are getting the number one athlete in the country who's projected to play on defensive line. Big Rich Anderson, who this staff believed was the best defensive lineman in America for the past 2 years. someone like Deuce Geralds, who is the all-time leading sack artist in the state of Georgia, and of course Trenton Henderson, an out-of-state top 100 prospect. Following in line, all of a sudden the Tigers are planning to bring in 4 defensive linemen that could see the rotation as soon as next season. All plenty of potential to add some power and speed to that defensive front.
And yeah, and to get them all, I mean, at one point, I always thought Lamar Brown would stick. I was kind of surprised Richard Anderson, being the first in that class. You thought maybe he would be the for sure one to send his letter of intent in. But, I get it. Everything's up in the air, and Lane Kiffin had just gotten on campus, and there's really no rush. So it was good to see it all come together in the end. Now, let's talk about flips that shaped this cycle for LSU. Obviously, landing those in-state linemen were important, but there are some major flips that went down in LSU recruiting world.
Yeah, good and bad. We know that 5-star wide receiver Tristan Keys flipped away from LSU to Tennessee over the summer, but Lane Kiffin was able to bring some fireworks to Baton Rouge as soon as he landed. They flipped Corey Barber Jr., who just won a state championship in Alabama. This was one of Kiffin and George McDonald's, the new wide receiver coach at LSU's, top targets. He's a home run threat on offense. He brings a ton of ability to the return game. They flip him to bolster this wide receiver group that also has Jabari Mack, a top 100 recruit from Destrehan, right down the road from Baton Rouge. They added a much-needed tight end and 4-star J.C. Anderson, who, of course, was committed to Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. And they bolster their offensive line and add another interior offensive lineman, Ryan Moret, flipping on National Signing Day. So 3 nice flips for Lane Kiffin and company, but right at the buzzer of the early signing window.
Yeah, it's not a flip, but I thought one of the more underrated storylines with LSU the week of National Signing Day was Havon Finney, the elite corner, sticking with LSU despite being from California. I mean, if Finney ever wanted an excuse to bounce out of a class, a head coaching change is that excuse. And, throughout the cycle, Michigan never let up. USC, Oregon never let up on Finney. So how was LSU able to hold on with minimal drama here?
Yeah, you mentioned it. USC never stopped swinging. Michigan and Oregon as well. Listen, Corey Raymond picks his guy of each recruiting cycle. His guy last year was DJ Pickett, who was a true All-American as a freshman in Baton Rouge. And Havon Finney has been Corey Raymond's guy since he was at Florida. That continued when he arrived at LSU, and he's been recruiting him better than any other coach or school. The fact that they were able to hold on despite the coaching change and these blue bloods swinging away is incredibly impressive, and goes to show why Lane Kiffin retained Corey Raymond in Baton Rouge. And another one, Rivals 300 offensive tackle Bryson Martinez. This is a guy who had a tremendous senior season. He not only played offensive tackle, he played running back, quarterback, receiver, tight end. He was a first-team All-District. He took 2 visits to Texas in the month of November. He sticks with LSU despite plenty of schools showing attention down the stretch.
All right. Well, that was a huge move to keep him in that class. Now, LSU fans always want to know, did they get the best players in the state of Louisiana? How do you think they did this year?
I think for the most part, they really did secure a nice border around the state. Of course, it's highlighted by Lamar Brown and Big Rich Anderson, who are 2 top 20 prospects in America, and both will reinforce that defensive line for years to come. This might be the best 1-2 punch along the defensive line that I've ever seen covering the state of Louisiana as long as I have. They did have one miss. Blaine Bradford, of course, is one of the best safeties, not only in Louisiana. He's from Baton Rouge, and he's stuck with Ohio State. That was an early commitment to Ryan Day and the Buckeyes back in March. Despite the coaching change, they're unable to turn over that leaf. They do make up for it, though, holding on to Isaiah Washington and Aiden Hall, 2 other 4-star safeties from the state of Louisiana. But it does, of course, sting a little bit to see Blaine Bradford taking his talents up to Columbus for this class.
Yeah. LSU fans, talk to Sam and I. How do you feel about Lane Kiffin's arrival? How do you feel about recruiting moving forward? And how do you feel about this class? Who's your favorite signee? Let us know in the comments below. Let's go behind the scenes of Texas Tech's 2026 class. There will be higher ranked classes for the Red Raiders. They finished 22, but man, did they bring in some firepower. Now we're going to go behind the scenes of this class with Sam Spiegelman, break it all down. But first, Texas Tech fans, it was an exciting run to the point we're at now. If you've watched one of these Texas Tech updates, make sure you guys hit subscribe because we are talking Red Raider recruiting all offseason long. All right, let's bring in Sam Spiegelman. Top 25 class. They're going to do better in the future, but what was it about this cycle that Texas Tech did right?
They did a lot of things right. This was a historic class for Joey McGuire and James Blanchard and the future of this Red Raiders program. They don't typically sign top 25 classes. And like you mentioned, they're only going to ascend from this point on. They beat national powerhouses for some of these recruits. At the top, you have LaDamian Guyton, a 5-star edge from South Georgia, beating the likes of Georgia and South Carolina. They went head-to-head with Texas and Ohio State for Felix Ojo, a 5-star offensive tackle. We don't usually talk about 5-star offensive tackles pre-2024 when we're talking about Texas Tech recruiting. These are national recruitments that Texas Tech is now winning. They're winning on the field, and they are Big 12 champions. But they're also doing it the old-fashioned Texas Tech way. If you ask James Blanchard, seeing diamonds in the rough, seeing traits, seeing production, guys like Keegan Ash and Donovan Webb and J.J. Mays are other members of this class to be excited about. But they're going toe-to-toe over some of the best in America, and they're winning those battles now, Josh.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch, fun to cover Texas Tech recruiting on this channel. 2 5-stars in this class, you mentioned them. Do you think that they could be early contributors when they arrive in Lubbock?
They're going to arrive in Lubbock this time next month, and they're going to hit the weight room in attempts to get on the field. What Texas Tech has done and separated themselves is return on investment, and they poured a lot of NIL money into LaDamian Guyton and Felix Ojo. So they're expecting to see them on the field sooner rather than later. We know that the Texas Tech pass rush has been ferocious this entire season. Their defense has been lights out. Now imagine LaDamian Guyton, one of the top edges in the country, a young prospect at that who reclassified, being on campus in a few months, competing for a spot. Felix Ojo, again, one of the most coveted, one of the most traitsy offensive tackles in the 2026 class. He's going to probably put on 20 or 30 pounds by the time he spends some time in Lubbock and is enrolled. I expect for him to be a part of that offensive line rotation or starting this time next year.
Wow. And it's not the Texas Tech roster has improved so much that it's not to say that these guys are going to walk in and start these days, but the names we just mentioned, they will contribute meaningful minutes next season for Texas Tech. So names to know right there. Speaking of names to know, who are some big swings that Texas Tech took that maybe they missed out on? Because obviously, they're not afraid to go after anybody in the nation, regardless of who's recruiting them. So who were some of the biggest battles that maybe they missed on this cycle? Hey, Inside Scoop watchers, let's talk game time because the NFL season is underway. Who doesn't love to see their favorite team live and in person, especially when you can go with a bunch of your buddies? But guess what? Tickets aren't always easy to find, and getting deals on last-minute tickets can be frustrating when all you want to do is be there the moment your team runs out onto the field. Well, thankfully, the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing ticket experiences, and it only takes a few simple clicks. The app is easy to use, and the Game Time guarantee, it means that you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, fees are always included, so what you see, it's what you pay. You can even get into NFL games as low as $100. That's why I use the Game Time app. It's super simple, and it makes the experience of buying great seats a breeze. Also, one of the coolest features I've seen is the Game Time lowest price guarantee. It's where Game Time will credit you 100% of the difference to guarantee you're getting the lowest price if you can find cheaper tickets elsewhere. All right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code INSIDESCOOP. That's promo code INSIDESCOOP for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's Inside Scoop for $20 off Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Yeah, Jamarian Carlton was a name that was very popular in Lubbock, especially in the spring and the summer. He took several visits out to Lubbock, and Texas Tech had a sizable NIL offer to Jamarian Carlton at Temple High School here in Texas. He obviously committed to Baylor over the summer, flipped to the Longhorns closer to signing day. Just a prospect that wanted to be closer to home here in Central Texas. They also missed on guys like KJ Ford and Davian Gross, guys that they made late runs at during their senior seasons. Neither ended up visiting Lubbock as expected. they also continue to try to flip London Smith, one of the most productive wide receivers in the state of Texas. He ends up sticking with Baylor. He's, of course, a Waco native, so very hard to pull him off of his Baylor commitment. Texas Tech gave quite a run to do so, though.
Yeah, and, you build those relationships during the high school recruitment. You never know what the portal will produce down the road. So we're going to keep talking Texas Tech recruiting, though. What about 2027? Coming off this number 22 ranked class, I said things are going to get better. What are we talking here in 2027? Top 10? Top 5? Is it potentially a top 3 number 1 class? What are the expectations? Where should Texas Tech fans set their expectations?
Yeah, I think they need to be ready to see a potential top 5 haul coming to Lubbock next year. They already have the foundation laid down. The number 1 prospect in America, Jalen Brewster, a ferocious defensive lineman from Cedar Hill, where, of course, Joey McGuire won 3 state titles back in the day, is already committed. So is blue chipper Adrian Redmond, part of a ferocious defensive line that they're assembling in the Texas Tech's 27 class. They, of course, hold a commitment from rivals number 1 passer, Kavian Bryant from East Texas. And they're in a great spot to continue to bolster that group. They're in a great spot with defensive linemen like George Toya and Zane Rowe, who are top 100 defensive linemen. They're in a great spot with Peyton Miller, one of the best offensive linemen in all of Texas. And they're leading the way for Jerry Outhouse, a top 10 cornerback, and swinging away at 5-star plus cornerback John Meredith, all expected to be on campus in the spring. We'll see how high this class can eventually go.
Yeah. Texas Tech fans, talk with us. How are you guys feeling? Who's your favorite player that Texas Tech signed in 2026? Put it in the comment section below. Let's talk USC. We're going to go behind the scenes of the Trojans' number 1 ranked recruiting class in 2026. And, in all honesty, they ran away with this one. Nearly wire to wire, number 1. And then on signing day, the nail in the coffin when Georgia, Notre Dame, Oregon were right on their heels, the nail in the coffin, flipping Caden Dixon-Wyatt from Ohio State on National Signing Day. We're going to go behind the scenes of all of the action with national analyst Adam Gorney. But USC fans, do me a favor real quick. Hit subscribe. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, and we love talking USC recruiting. All right, let's bring in Adam Gorney, and let's start with the biggest news of National Signing Day. Maybe not the biggest news of USC's cycle, but certainly on signing day, wide receiver Caden Dixon-Wyatt flipping his commitment to USC. I mean, obviously Brian Hartline leaves, but take us behind the scenes. I mean, this one was going on well before Hartline accepted the USF job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so, you can make an argument that Dixon-Wyatt is the best receiver at modern day, the most productive over the last few years, especially since Chris Henry missed almost all of his junior year with that knee injury. I was told leading up to signing day a few weeks out that it was probably 80-20 that he was going to flip to USC, even if the NIL money wasn't matching up. And there have been differing reports to who you talk to about that. But even if the NIL money wasn't matching up, some people close to Dixon-Wyatt really wanted him closer to home. We all know as signing day gets closer, the realization of leaving that far comes into play. And so some people that were kind of in his orbit were telling him, hey, USC has a big opportunity for receivers to come in early and play. If you go to Ohio State, you will be developed. You are going to play for, maybe the top team in the country. But there is a long list of receivers waiting to get on the field there. I think Brandon Innis's name was thrown around as someone who has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle there. But there is still a compelling case to go to Ohio State. But he's from Northern California. He now lives in Southern California. His mom is there. I think they wanted him closer to home. From what I was told, USC basically told him, we will take you. We want you. We will take you. But we're not going to be able to match Ohio State's money. Mm-hmm. If you're willing to accept that and get developed here, Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane look like they're headed off to the NFL. They've really emerged as 2 elite wide receivers in this class, but now they're off. So Caden Dixon-Wyatt could step in, compete early for playing time, stay close to family. It all kind of played a big factor down the stretch.
Yeah, and sometimes that location, when pen has to meet paper, it all becomes real, and you start to realize, like, hey, maybe I can accomplish all the things I want to much closer to home, and maybe, that probably did play a big factor in it. Now, when we talk about USC recruiting, there are obviously some big wins. And when you have big wins, you're taking a lot of big swings. They didn't land everybody they pursued. I mean, they did come up short on flipping a Chris Henry Jr., maybe Ryder Lyons, Richard Wesley. What were some of the biggest battles maybe USC did not win in this cycle?
Yeah, what's incredible is that they won a lot of battles, and then they fought a lot of them early. So they kind of had a really good read on their class through the fall, where it was more, boring. A lot of the stuff happened in the spring and summer. They loaded up, and like you said, Josh, a lot of that class came together early to hold on to that number one spot and then be able to get Dixon Wyatt on signing day. But yeah, those are some of the interesting ones to watch. Now, I was told down the stretch that USC over and over again, because I kept asking, no, USC was not recruiting Chris Henry late. Maybe they kind of put out some feelers when he started, shuffling things around after Hartline left 30 minutes before he was to sign at Mater Dei. But no, they were not really in the game there. They didn't have the NIL money package put together for Chris Henry. Ryder Lyons is an interesting one because it seemed like USC was the team to beat early on. They were really going after him. His brother plays there, all of those things. He would have been a 2027 prospect, but I was also told that Peyton Houston was definitely their number one target in the 2027 class. So, there was some movement there. He had visited USC multiple times to watch his brother play. It became a big thing heading into signing day that he was taking a visit to Oregon for the USC game, both for Oregon and USC. Again, he says that he was just going to see his brother play. He's not beholden to BYU really in any way. He signed with BYU, but again, he's going to go through the recruiting process again. He's going to Orlando on a one-year mission. So he's going to be recruited again. Richard Wesley early on, freshman, sophomore year, he was talking Oregon, USC. It looked like very much like a Kayvon Thibodeau battle. Was he going to stay home? Was he going to go to Oregon? He chose Oregon, and then obviously the thing happened with the pool and the NIL deal, and people got soured on that, and then he ended up signing with Texas. So those are three kind of the in-state battles, if you want to call them battles, down, early on that were kind of phased out as the recruiting cycle went on.
Yeah. And to your point, they did go through these battles early enough to where even when they went the other way, they were able to capitalize on another prospect on the board, refilling that position. So no harm, no foul, but you never know with the transfer portal these days. Some of the names we just hit on could be in a USC uniform in a year or two. So just we'll wait and see. When we talk about this class years from now, 5-10 years from now, who do you think we're going to be talking about when it comes to breakout stars?
Yeah, I think one that's really interesting is Trent Mosley. And he is, he led his team to the Southern Section State Championship, essentially California's state championship, with a phenomenal playoff run. And what was really interesting about Mosley throughout his high school career is he was always sort of bothered by nagging injuries. So if he can kind of get over that injury hump, he is as good of a receiver as there is in California, and that means around the country. He's just a very productive guy with sort of surprising speed that really just fits into what Lincoln Riley wants to do on offense. And then another one is the Folsom offensive lineman, Vlad Diakonov, because he's not fully physically ready yet. So you always sort of like those offensive tackles who aren't maxed out when they get to college, and he'll be able to put on that weight in a college weight room, grow into his body. And if he keeps that athleticism, he could be really special down the line as well. And then a third one, I think, and this one is sort of obvious, he's not really under the radar, but I think Mark Bowman really was sort of underutilized in high school. I think he is pretty Brock Bowersy. He just always gets open, and he never, ever drops a pass. And he's physical, and he loves to block, and he's a total locker room guy, and he's just totally focused on everything you want right about building a program into a national power. So one of the reasons he picked USC is because Lincoln Riley told him they're going to use a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of one running back, 2 tight ends, and get the ball to him. Now, if that becomes the case, especially when he gets to campus, we will see. But Mark Bowman definitely believed it, and there's absolutely no reason not to throw him the ball. At Mater Dei, they had Chris Henry, Caden Dixon-Wyatt, Mark Bowman, Georgia commit Gavin Honoré, and others to throw the ball to, and they were a run-focused team. So whether it was Nate Frazier or Jordan Davison or any of the number of running backs that they use this year, the ball got really spread around. So his stats didn't, go through the roof, but it was because it was essentially a college football team on a high school level.
Yeah, really exciting cycle for USC fans. I know there's been drama in past years, but this one, besides the big wins, I mean, it was almost drama-less. So USC fans, talk with us. Who are you most excited about seeing in a USC uniform from this class? Let us know. Comment section below. What if I told you the most exciting recruiting class didn't even finish in the top 25, but they still moved up 100 spots? Virginia Tech. Okay, they didn't move up 100 spots. They moved up 91. They finished 27th in the country, and James Franklin pulled off a minor miracle. We're going to go behind the scenes of this one with national analyst Adam Gorney. But first, Virginia Tech fans, what an offseason it's already been. We're not done talking Hokie recruiting. We're going to do it all season long, so hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. All right, let's bring on Adam Gorney. Like I said, finishing 27th in the country normally isn't something that you'd really go crazy over, but the fact that Virginia Tech was able to pull this off after being ranked 118th, how were the Hokies able to do this?
Yeah, this was all timing, relationships, and maybe a little bit sweet revenge here. So James Franklin gets fired in mid-October at Penn State after losing 3 straight games. And what Virginia Tech did very smartly here is they didn't wait. They didn't try to, go after 50 candidates, maybe like Penn State did in their search that dragged on for so long. They went and they got James Franklin. They convinced him. And what James Franklin did, which was also smart, is which is also sort of surprising because he had floated his name out there over the years for other jobs, is that he jumped on this opportunity quickly. He met with some people. He was at his lake house in Georgia. He met with some people and he jumped on the opportunity, which allowed him to get such a massive jump start on all the other open jobs, to go after a lot of the Penn State commits. Now, he said at his signing day press conference that it was really not going after Penn State's class, not targeting Penn State's class. It was about relationships that he had built over the years with these guys. Probably a little bit of both. I don't think he was, sad to take a lot of these guys away from the school that fired him. But they were also, what he saw and what his staff saw as, higher end Big Ten, contenders, players, recruits that could compete at Penn State, which was one of the top teams heading into this season. So he did a phenomenal job convincing those guys to just go a few hours down the road to Blacksburg, follow him. He's a relationships guy. Everybody knows James Franklin is a phenomenal recruiter. He did a great job getting a lot of these guys. Messiah Mickens looked like he was, set for Oklahoma. He goes to Virginia Tech. Troy Hune could have easily gone up the road to Stanford and played, for Tavita Pritchard and Andrew Luck. He follows him across the country to Blacksburg after a late visit. So he did a phenomenal job, but I think the timing of the hire was really everything here.
Yeah. So a lot of times when we see coaching changes, we identify the first signing class as like a transition class. And normally in a transition class, you don't have a lot of hits. You have a lot of misses because, hey, you're getting situated. Maybe the board is a little confusing and you're just taking guys to fill out your class. But in this case, 11 flips from Penn State. I mean, that was James Franklin's class. Can we take the transition tag off of this?
Absolutely. And I think, you put it on a class like Penn State, which had 2 guys remaining, and You can't hold that against Matt Campbell 5 years from now if he's recruiting well or recruiting poorly. Lane didn't have a ton of time, but has held on to a lot of those guys. So give him credit. So I think each instance is different, but usually coaches are hired because the other coach, did really poorly and then has absolutely no time before signing day to get a class together. He's just piecemealing it together. But now, with Franklin having, basically a month, a lead time on these other coaches, he was be able to establish himself. He wasn't an unknown assistant getting a job somewhere. He knew all of these guys. All of them sat in his office at Penn State. So sitting in the office at Virginia Tech is essentially the same thing. The tag of, not having a great, first year recruiting class and then going in after that is definitely off Franklin, because he did a phenomenal job getting these guys to number 27.
All right. So when you look at this class, and it's going to continue to develop over the next couple of years, but who are some of the players you think are going to make a major impact at Virginia Tech?
Yeah, I think defensively, you look at Tyson Harley as an edge rusher. You look at Terry Wiggins as a linebacker with a lot of length. You look at Messiah Mickens, who sort of reminds you, I think Penn State wanted him to be that Katron Allen type, that pounder running back. Davion Brown, Fat Rat. Everybody in Blacksburg is me calling him Fat Rat. Is a guy that can put up big numbers, and he he's a kid from Virginia that was at Maryland the weekend before. And then I think you look at the quarterback. When Franklin was still at Penn State, they were playing at UCLA. The night before the UCLA game, he drove down to San Diego to see Troy Hune play. Troy Hune the next day goes to the Penn State game at UCLA where they lost. That relationship goes back a very long time, and that comfort level really, really works out there. So I think when that kind of all comes together, there's a lot of familiarity, and I think those are some of the guys to really watch. All Penn State names, all guys that were going to go to Penn State. There was not a lot of drama in their recruitments, and then they ended up all flipping to Virginia Tech.
What a run it's been. 3-4 weeks of just nonstop recruiting. James Franklin, you would think he can take a breather, but we got the transfer portal open up soon, so Virginia Tech going to get active there as well. But talk to me about this recruiting class. Who is your favorite flip? Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk Texas A&M, because their recruiting class ranked number 8 in America. You guys followed it. There were some big wins, some big flips. We are going to go behind the scenes, talk all about it with national analyst Sam Spiegelman. But first, Texas A&M fans, do me a favor. Hit subscribe. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, and we love talking Aggies recruiting, so do me a favor, hit subscribe. All right. Let's bring in Sam Spiegelman. We're talking about a top 10 class from Mike Elko and his staff. So, Sam, what went right this cycle for the Aggies? Who were some of the biggest wins in this class?
Yeah, well, they signed a couple of blue chippers on both sides of the ball. Let's start with the number 2 cornerback in the country out of the West Coast, Brandon Arrington. That's someone who I think could come in and play relatively quickly in a secondary that was basically one of the heartbeats of that, very exciting Aggies defense this year. They also added a top 10 edge, a 2-time All-American in Bryce Perry-Wright. We know how great that Aggies pass rush has been under Mike Elko since he's been there. They add another blue chipper from Buford, Georgia to bolster that. Of course, you add 4-star edge Tristan Givens, who is a hot commodity, beating out schools like Tennessee for Tristan Givens. We know that they were able to get some big flips down the stretch, getting Rivals 300 running back Carson Baker, Rivals 300 wide receiver Jaden Warren, both big flips in the last month before signing day. And of course, holding on to KJ Edwards, the number 3 running back in the country. We know this Aggies offense has been so explosive, and when they're well balanced with that running game, we've seen Reuben Owens, Jamarian Morrow come through. They're going to add one of the best running backs from their home state to the mix. He can impact not only the running game, but be an impact player in the passing game as well.
Yeah, so for those that followed Texas A&M recruiting, I mean, you don't sign a class like this without taking some big swings. Obviously, they did just that, landing some elite players, but you're not going to land everybody. Who do you think some of the biggest misses were this cycle?
Yeah, you're right. This class, a top 10 class, could have been even better if a couple of things had fallen the right way. We know that the Aggies finished very close second behind LSU for Lamar Brown, the number 1 player in the country. I think Aggies fans can remember better than you or me, Josh, that Lamar Brown canceled his LSU official visit after leaving A&M on that Sunday night and ended up making it back to Baton Rouge, and the rest is history. A&M really was a front runner for Boobie Feaster, the number 4 receiver in the country. He ultimately signed with the Trojans. They were predicted to flip KJ Ford, a Rivals 300 edge, who stuck with Florida despite the coaching change and 3 visits back to A&M this season. So not everything went completely according to plan. They also lost a commitment from Jonathan Hatton, one of the state's best running backs from Cibolo Steel, who flipped back to Oklahoma just before signing day. But of course, they made up for that with the flip of Carson Baker in the end anyway.
Yeah, and Braylon Womack was another one down the stretch. I thought I thought they were going to get one of two of Jace Matthews, Braylon Womack, both committed to Auburn at the time. Braylon Womack signs with Mississippi State in the end, so that was kind of crazy. But what a class. So when we're looking back at this, say 4, 5, 10 years from now, who do you think we're going to talk about in this 2026 class as breakout stars?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it already, but KJ Edwards is a different sort of cat. If you're a fan of Texas high school football, this young man has been a home run threat on offense for Carthage for the past 4 seasons. And, Texas A&M fans are going to be tuned in for the next 2 weeks because they're going to be probably playing back in AT&T Stadium in a few weeks. But this young man blends speed, power, home run ability, balance. He's a fantastic pass catcher. He's going to fit right into a loaded Aggies backfield, and they think that he can someone who can play sooner rather than later. And then on the other side of the ball, Bryce Perry-Wright has been one of the best versatile pieces on the defensive line for Buford, an absolute powerhouse in the state of Georgia. The Aggies defensive line coaches love Bryce Perry-Wright. He was a must-get in this class. Signing him, holding off Miami, which came full throttle down the stretch trying to add him. He's someone who I think is going to be a part of that rotation before too long in College Station.
Yeah. So as the Aggies prep for the Miami Hurricanes in the playoffs, we are here to celebrate their class. We want to talk to you, Texas A&M fans. How are you feeling about this cycle, and who do you think is going to be the breakout star when it's all said and done? Let us know in the comment section below. Let's talk Heisman finalists. This weekend in New York City, there will be 4 elite college football players on that stage in the running to win the Heisman Trophy. And today, we have national analyst Adam Gorney on. We're going to go behind the scenes, figure out how did we get here? What were the recruitments like of these 4, and how did they end up at the teams they're on right now? Before we get into it, though, guys, do me a favor. Hit subscribe to the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right, let's bring in Adam Gorney, and we're going to start with Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame. Obviously, this one, he wasn't hard to miss. He was the 5th best running back in that 2023 cycle, but he had a pretty big recruitment, if I remember. Who were some of the teams in the running for him?
Yeah, Notre Dame always felt like the team to beat. And honestly, as we go through this list, this is the most boring and predictable recruitment of all. He just basically picked, a school, stayed with the school, and signed with the school.
Yeah,
so
not the others.
Alabama, not the others. Oh my God, not the others. Alabama was there, Michigan, Texas A&M, Oregon. But Notre Dame felt like the school for a long time. That's where he ended up. But it was really interesting because at that time when he committed, Dylan Edwards, remember that name? He had been committed to Notre Dame at that time. So he had flipped around. He ended up at Colorado. Now he was at Kansas State. Now he's back in the portal. His journey has been absolutely incredible. But Jaden Limar was also recruited, committed to Notre Dame at that time. He's at Oregon now. So one does kind of wonder what that running back room looks like. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price have been so dominant this year. But what does it look like with Dylan Edwards, a Jaden Limar? What does that look like for Jeremiah Love's progression to the Heisman dais?
Hey, only one ball to carry, and Jeremiah Love would be taking a lot of carries away from those guys, so you can kind of understand why they left. Now, let's move on to Diego Pavia, who has had a winding road. Was he even ranked in high school, or did he get his ranking once he went to JUCO? How did that work?
Yeah, from everything that I researched about this, he was not ranked in high school in New Mexico, and so this is the incredible part about ranking players and then seeing how they go. You're not going to rank a kid in New Mexico who ends up playing 2 years at New Mexico Military Institute, then transfers for 2 years to New Mexico State, then transfers for 2 years to Vanderbilt. So his journey has been absolutely incredible. Really not noticed out of high school, really not noticed when he went to JUCO, honestly not noticed at New Mexico State until for a national audience, when he dominated Auburn at Auburn and beat them 31-10 in that game. I think he threw 3 touchdowns in that game as well. And then after that game, it seemed like his NIL recruitment just went through the roof and everybody wanted him the next year. Vanderbilt landed him. And now he's going to, be he's a Heisman front runner. We'll see if he wins it. Probably not the favorite heading into Saturday night, but his journey has been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and paved the way for Vanderbilt to land 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis. I don't think they land Jared Curtis without Diego Pavia doing what he did. Do you?
I think two things played into Curtis. One, Clark Lee signing that extension. Sure. I don't think the timing of that was, it was right in place for what Curtis needed. He wanted to play for Clark Lee. Clark Lee is going to be there. All indications. The other thing is how Diego Pavia plays the position at Vanderbilt and how he has that freedom is sort of how Jared Curtis plays in high school. And so I think he saw a lot of that. He has that moxie, that confidence bordering on cockiness, I think is really important. And so he saw in him, in his own game, what Pavia does on the field, and it worked. So, Georgia was right there with Curtis until the end, but sitting behind Gunnar Stockton. And then I don't want to say being a system quarterback, but definitely being in a system at Georgia, I think, was a deciding factor on why Vanderbilt worked out. They were winning. Clark Lee signed that extension. And then Diego Pavia not only talked up Curtis multiple times, but the way he plays, I think, really played a factor there.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on and talk about Julian Sayin, Ohio State quarterback. And when he was in high school, he was rated as the second best quarterback, only behind Florida's DJ Lagway. Both of them were 5-star prospects. Obviously, DJ Lagway's career hasn't really gained the traction that Julian Sayin's has. There's a coaching change at Florida. We'll see if Lagway even remains as a Florida Gator. But Julian Sayin, he already has a transfer under his belt as well.
The best way I can describe Julian Sayin is that I was standing on the sidelines of the Elite 11, and Dylan Raiola and Julian Sayin were going back and forth for the championship. And Raiola put up a big number in the gauntlet, which is like the big night of scoring. And Sayin kind of walks up to me and goes, "What was his score?" I told him, and he just kind of nodded and smiled and then went out and beat it. So that's just the kind of kid he is. Like, is he the flashiest, most exciting, best quote, Diego Pavia type? No, absolutely not. He's like the antithesis of that. Yeah. But what's so great about him, other than in the Big Ten championship where there were some struggles, is that he just makes every throw is so incredibly accurate and has always been that way and is mature beyond his years. So when he goes to Alabama, he picks Alabama because he wanted to play for Nick Saban. He wanted to play for the greatest of all time, but he really clicked with offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien at the time. He gets there. 2 weeks later, Saban retires, surprisingly. Bill O'Brien leaves for Boston College. He, right. According, to the book, the book about college football and the era of chaos, he then meets with Kalen DeBoer. So he stays at Alabama, meets with Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer makes him wait, an inordinate amount of time to meet with him, and then goes into his office and asks him to spell his last name, which is essentially telling the kid, "We don't really want you here," or we're bringing our own people in. So Sayin is now stuck. The kid who really just methodically went through the recruiting process, crossed every T and dotted every I through it, and now has to transfer after being at Alabama for like 3 weeks, finds Ohio State, sits behind Will Howard last year, who won a national championship, and now is taking the Buckeyes, an upset, mad Ohio State team, into the playoffs. So he found his spot, incredible journey, but now, doing phenomenal things at Ohio State.
Yeah, and I'll always remember the Julian Sayin era at Alabama. I mean, he kind of represented to me, like, that was when this new age of transfer portal NIL really slapped me in the face. Like, seeing Julian Sayin put on the Alabama uniform a couple days. I mean, there was practice video of him out there in an Alabama uniform, had the helmet on and everything. Then he just gets up and leaves. And that was like, oh, okay, this is what it looks like now. And like you said, there's obvious reasons why he left. And the way that this NCAA calendar works, like, you can't fault guys for leaving when they come and sign up for a coach and an offensive coordinator and they're both gone. But Julian Sayin, Ohio State, he'll be on stage at the Heisman along with Fernando Mendoza. And he's had a winding road coming out of high school as a 3-star quarterback.
Yeah, a 3-star quarterback who in his senior year only threw for about 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns. So he wasn't exactly lighting it up and everybody was missing out on the kid. He was committed to Yale. He was going to Yale. And you do wonder, Justin Martin had decommitted from Cal. In September, they were searching for a quarterback. Mendoza gets a late offer. He decides to flip from Yale to Cal.
Yeah.
But then it's not like he electrified the scoreboard once he got there. He redshirted in 2022. He was the backup for the first half of 2023. And then week 6, he gets in against Oregon State, and he didn't leave the field until he transferred. So he played the rest of the 2023 season, and then he transfers. He plays at Cal again, puts up big numbers, and then transfers and goes to Indiana, where he and Curt Cignetti and that offense have just clicked so well. Obviously a mature kid, smart kid who is going to be playing in the Ivy League. But you do wonder, and now the number 1 team heading into the playoff, but you do wonder if Justin Martin does not decommit from Cal, is Fernando Mendoza at Yale and just lighting up the scoreboard in the Ivy Leagues.
Yeah. You don't really know. That's why these recruitments are fun to watch. So you guys see it. These are the 4 names. Now you know their recruitments. Who do you think is going to win the Heisman on Saturday? Let us know. Comment section below.